Have you ever felt that inexplicable discomfort around certain people? That chill running down your spine, that gut feeling telling you something isn't right, even though you can't explain it in words? It's not a coincidence. It's not paranoia. It's your intuition, that inner voice that Carl Jung considered our purest connection to the collective unconscious, trying to protect you. Welcome to a new video. Today we're going to delve into a topic that can radically change the quality of your life and relationships. The 5 signs that, according to Jung's philosophy, indicate you should distance yourself from someone immediately. Before we begin, I want to ask you a question. How many times have you ignored these warning signs only to regret it later? That hunch you dismissed, that first impression you ignored. We've all done it. We live in a society that teaches us to be nice, to give second chances, to doubt our perceptions. But Jung, one of the most brilliant psychologists of the 20th century, left us profound teachings on why we should pay more attention to these signals. Jung firmly believed that our unconscious perceives much more than our conscious mind can process. Like an internal radar, it captures subtleties in behavior, incongruities between words and actions, energies that we cannot rationally explain. And it's this radar that triggers those alarms when we're faced with someone who, consciously or not, could be harmful to our well-being. Let me share with you the 5 signs that Jung would identify as clear indicators that you should distance yourself from someone. These aren't opinions based on prejudices or mere popular advice. They're profound psychological manifestations of dynamics that can be toxic to your personal development and your individuation, a central concept in Jungian theory. The first sign, constant shadow projection. Jung dedicated much of his work to the concept of the shadow, that part of our psyche that contains everything we repress, deny, or don't want to see in ourselves. When someone constantly accuses you of intentions or characteristics that are actually their own, you're witnessing the projection of their shadow. Imagine this. You meet someone who's always talking about how manipulative others are, how everyone tries to take advantage of their kindness. However, over time, you realize that it's precisely this person who manipulates situations, who distorts facts to look good, who constantly makes you feel guilty for establishing healthy boundaries. What's happening is massive projection. This person hasn't integrated those aspects of themselves that they consider unacceptable, and instead of doing so, they project them onto you and others. It's an unconscious defense mechanism, but incredibly harmful to those around them. Jung taught us that we all project to some extent. It's part of our psychic nature. But when someone lives in a constant state of projection, when they're unable to take responsibility for their own shadows, they become a whirlwind that drags everyone around them into their own inner chaos. If you've noticed this pattern in someone, if you constantly feel accused of things you know aren't true, if conversations always end with that person pointing out your supposed flaws while ignoring their own, it's time to create distance. It's not your job to help them integrate their shadow. It's not your responsibility to be the receptacle for their projections. The second sign, systematic violation of your boundaries. Jung understood personal boundaries as something sacred, a manifestation of our respect for ourselves and others. When someone repeatedly ignores, dismisses, or ridicules your boundaries, they're communicating something deeply concerning, that their desires, needs, or conveniences are above your well-being. This can manifest in subtle ways. Perhaps it's that person who always arrives late, who insists on talking about topics that make you uncomfortable despite you clearly expressing it, or who pressures you to do things you've said you don't want to do. Or maybe it's more evident, someone who touches your body without permission, who enters your personal space uninvited, who reads your private messages by accident. Whatever the form, the underlying message is the same. Your boundaries don't matter, and if you allow this behavior to continue, you're sending a message to your unconscious that you don't matter enough either. Jung pointed out that healthy boundaries are essential for the process of individuation, that path toward integrating all parts of our being. When we allow someone to constantly violate our boundaries, we're hindering our own psychic growth. We're allowing an external force to interrupt the essential dialogue between our conscious and our unconscious. If someone in your life shows this pattern, if you feel that your no's are treated as suggestions rather than firm decisions, it's time to reconsider that relationship. It's not selfishness, it's self-preservation in its most basic and necessary form. The third sign, inconsistency between words and actions. Jung taught us to pay attention not only to what people say, but to what they do. The inconsistency between words and actions reveals an internal disconnection, a lack of integration between different aspects of personality. Think about that person who always promises but rarely delivers. Who talks about honesty while lying to you? Who preaches respect while treating you with disdain when no one else is looking? This type of incongruence isn't simply being human or having bad moments. It's a pattern that reveals something much deeper. A person who hasn't done the inner work necessary to align their intentions with their actions. In Jungian terms, this inconsistency may reflect an unresolved conflict between the persona, the social mask, and the shadow, or even between different autonomous complexes within the psyche. It's as if different parts of the personality are at war, and you find yourself trapped in the middle of the battlefield. The danger with these people is that they're often very convincing with their words. They can create elaborate narratives, seductive promises, explanations that seem reasonable. But over time, reality always prevails. Actions reveal the truth that words try to hide. If you've noticed this pattern in someone, if you constantly find yourself convinced by their explanations only to be disappointed by their actions, it's time to trust what you see, not what you hear. As Jung would say, pay attention to the evidence, not the narrative. The fourth sign, constant energy drain. Jung was one of the first Western psychologists to recognize the importance of psychic energy, or libido, not in the Freudian sense, but as the vital force that animates our psyche. He described how this energy flows between different complexes and archetypes, and how certain interactions can strengthen or weaken us. There are people who, after interacting with them, leave you inexplicably exhausted, as if they had absorbed something from you. It's not just physical or mental fatigue, it's a deep feeling of having been emptied of something essential. Jung might describe this as an imbalance in the energy exchange, possibly related to unconscious complexes that are hungry for energy. These people often have what Jung would call an unintegrated power complex. Unable to generate their own vital energy due to unresolved internal conflicts, they unconsciously seek to absorb it from others. It's not necessarily malicious. Often they're not even aware of what they're doing. But the effect on you remains devastating. You can identify these people because after being with them, you feel exhausted for no apparent reason. You might notice that you avoid answering their calls or make up excuses not to see them. This is no coincidence. Your unconscious is trying to protect you from this energy drain. If someone in your life consistently leaves you feeling this way, it's crucial that you establish distance. It's not about being rude or completely cutting contact, although sometimes this is necessary, but about being aware of how this dynamic affects you and taking measures to protect your vital energy. The fifth sign, resistance to change and growth. Jung's life's work centered on the process of individuation, that journey toward integrating all parts of our being, toward realizing our authentic self. This process requires constant change, adaptation, growth. It requires facing our shadows, integrating our complexes, dialoguing with our archetypes. There are people who, consciously or unconsciously, will try to sabotage your growth. Perhaps because your change reminds them of their own stagnation. Perhaps because your individuation threatens the role they want you to play in their life. Or perhaps because their own fear of change is so deep that they cannot tolerate seeing it in others. How does this manifest? Sometimes subtly, discouraging comments when you share your goals, minimization of your achievements, comparisons that make you feel inadequate. Other times it's more evident, direct criticism of your new interests, attempts to make you feel guilty for dedicating time to your development, or even active sabotage of your efforts. Jung would understand this as a manifestation of fear, fear of change, fear of the unknown, fear of losing control. People trapped in their own fear complexes can unconsciously become agents of stagnation for those around them. If someone in your life shows constant resistance to your growth, if they make you feel bad for wanting more, for aspiring to authenticity, for seeking your true self, it's time to ask yourself if this person has a place on the path of individuation you're traversing. Now, it's important to clarify something. Jung taught us to view these dynamics with compassion. These people aren't bad or toxic in a simplistic moral sense. They're individuals dealing with their own unresolved complexes, with their own unintegrated shadows. They are, like all of us, on their own path. But Jung also taught us the importance of personal responsibility. Your first duty is to your own process of individuation, to your own psychic well-being, to the realization of your authentic self. And sometimes, this means distancing yourself from people who, regardless of their intentions, are hindering this process. This doesn't mean you should dramatically cut ties or announce your decision. Distance can be created gradually, with compassion, but with firmness. Remember that, according to Jung, everything you repress or deny doesn't disappear. It simply sinks into the unconscious where it can cause more harm. That's why it's important to honestly recognize these dynamics and act accordingly, not from resentment or anger, but from clarity and self-respect. Let me share a personal reflection that Jung would probably appreciate. For years, I kept someone in my life who displayed several of these signs. I ignored my intuition, rationalized problematic behaviors, convinced myself it was my duty to stay there. The result was profound exhaustion, a disconnection from myself, a constant feeling of living a life that wasn't really mine. It was only when I finally had the courage to create distance that I could clearly see what was happening. That distance not only allowed me to recover my energy and reconnect with my path, but also gave me the perspective to understand that this person was acting from their own wounds, from their own unresolved complexes. This allowed me to let go of resentment and maintain compassion, even while keeping my boundaries firm. Jung taught us that true love, both toward ourselves and others, doesn't consist of fusion or sacrifice, but in respect for individuality and each person's unique process. Sometimes the most loving way to relate to someone is by giving them the space to face their own shadows, instead of allowing them to project them onto you. Now I want to ask you, do you recognize any of these signs in people in your life? Have you been ignoring your intuition, that deep knowledge that Jung valued so much? Have you been allowing someone to hinder your path toward individuation, toward the realization of your authentic self? I'm not suggesting you cut ties with everyone at the first sign of difficulty. Human relationships are complex and all go through difficult moments. Even Jung recognized that some degree of projection is inevitable in any close relationship. What I'm suggesting, what Jung would suggest, is that you pay attention, that you honor that inner voice that warns you when something isn't right, that you recognize that your psychic well-being, your process of individuation, your path toward authenticity, are sacred and deserve to be protected. And if, after honest reflection, you recognize that someone in your life consistently shows these signs, that they take you away from your true self instead of supporting you on your path toward it, then perhaps it's time to create distance, not from fear or resentment, but from self-love and clarity. Jung believed that each of us has a unique purpose, a singular contribution to make to the world. But we can only fulfill that purpose when we're aligned with our authentic self, when we've integrated our shadows, when we've balanced our archetypes. And this process of individuation sometimes requires us to distance ourselves from people who, consciously or unconsciously, keep us trapped in patterns that no longer serve us. Remember, your intuition, that inner voice that Jung considered our most direct connection to the collective unconscious, already knows who these people are in your life. It has already been whispering to you that something isn't right. The question is, are you ready to listen? Before ending this video, I want to leave you with a final reflection. Jung taught us that true change always begins from within, that we cannot change others, only ourselves, that our primary responsibility is to our own process of individuation. This means that, even as you create distance from people who show these signs, the real work is in examining why you allowed them in your life in the first place. What personal complexes, what unhealed wounds, what unconscious patterns kept you in these dynamics? It's not to blame you, but to empower you. Because when you understand your own patterns, when you illuminate your own shadows, when you integrate your own complexes, you will naturally begin to attract people who reflect this integration, this authenticity, this respect for the process of individuation. And that's when you'll discover what Jung knew, that the deepest, most meaningful, most nourishing relationships aren't those in which you lose yourself to please another, but those in which you both mutually support each other on the path toward the realization of your authentic self. If this video resonated with you, if you recognize these signs in people in your life, I want you to know that you're not alone. That this awakening, this recognition, is part of your own process of individuation, and that you have every right, even the responsibility, to protect that process. I invite you to reflect deeply on what we've discussed today, to observe your relationships with new eyes, to listen to that inner voice that Jung valued so much, and, if necessary, to have the courage to create distance from people who, regardless of their intentions, are hindering your path toward authenticity. If you like this video and want more content about Jung, about healthy relationships, about the path toward individuation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. I also invite you to share your experiences in the comments. Have you recognized these signs in someone? Have you had the courage to create distance? Your story might be just what someone else needs to hear. And remember, as Jung taught us, the journey toward the authentic self isn't easy, but it's the only one worth undertaking. And sometimes, that journey requires leaving behind the familiar to embrace the unknown, trusting that your psyche is guiding you exactly where you need to go. Thank you for joining me in this video. Until next time.